The third canto, the third chapter. And the text today, 27. If there are you already have on your room devices. Word by word and transliteration. Nitya. Eternal.
Eternal.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'd already been thinking about it, so that was not done. The power of devotion and divine grace sing in devotional, but the hymn is very rather.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jaya Shri Vishnupada Paramahansa Paramahansa Jaya Sitaras Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai Iskandi Divine Acharya Divine Grace Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hare Hare. So now the word by word and transliteration. Nitya, eternal. Aruda, situated in. Samadhitvat, from trance. Paravrita, freed from. Guna, of the modes of material nature. Brahma, illusion. Nasasmara, she did not remember. Tada, then. Atmanam, her material body. Swapne, in a dream. Dristam, seen. Eva, just as. Utita, one who has arisen. So, Nityahura samadhitattva. Nityahura samadhitvat. Nityahura samadhitvat. Paravrita guna brahma. Paravrita guna brahma. Paravrita guna brahma. Nasasmara tadatmanam. Nasasmara tadatmanam. Nasasmara tadatmanam. Swapne drishtamevo titaha. Swapne drishtamevo titaha. Swapne drishtamevo titaha. Swapne drishtamevo titaha. Nirarudha samadhitvat. Paravrita guna brahma. Nasasmara tadatmanam. Swapne drishtamevo titaha. Ladies.
Nityaruda samadhitva.
Nityaruda samadhitva.
Paravrita gunadhama.
Paravrita gunadhama.
Sasmara tadatmanam.
Nasasmara tadatmanam.
Swapne drishtamivodhitaha.
Swapne drishtamivodhitaha.
Nityaruda samadhitva.
Nityaruda samadhitva. Paravrita gunadhama. Nasasmara tadatmanam. Swapne drishtamivodhitaha.
Anyone else?
Nityaruda samadhitva.
Nityaruda samadhitva. Paravrita gunadhama. Nasasmara tadatmanam. Swapne drishtamivodhitaha.
Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Situated in eternal trance and freed from illusion impelled by the modes of material nature, she, referring to Devahuti, forgot her material body, just as one forgets his different bodies in a dream. Purport. Oops. A great Vaishnav said, that he who has no remembrance of his body is not bound to material existence. As long as we are conscious of our bodily existence, it is said to be understood that we are living conditionally under the three modes of material nature. When one forgets his bodily existence, his conditional material life is over. This forgetfulness is actually possible when we engage our senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In the conditional state, one engages his senses as a member of a family or as a member of a society or country. But when one forgets all such membership in material circumstances and realizes that he is an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, that is actual forgetfulness of material existence. This forgetfulness occurs actually when one renders service unto the Lord. A devotee no longer works with the body for sense gratification, with families, society, country, humanity, and so on. He simply works for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. That is perfect Krishna consciousness. A devotee always merges in transcendental happiness, and therefore he has no experience of material distresses. This transcendental happiness is called eternal bliss. According to the opinion of devotees, constant remembrance of the Supreme Lord is called samadhi, or trance. If one is constantly in trance, there is no possibility of his being attacked or even touched by the modes of material nature. As soon as one is freed from the contamination of the three material modes, he no longer has to take birth to transmigrate from one form to another in this material world. Please repeat, situated in eternal trance, and freed from illusion, impelled by the modes of material nature, she forgot her material body. Just as one forgets his different bodies in a dream. So, Om Yantavrandasya Janana Sukalaya Chachurilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Ravi Namaha. Everybody Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Haskachana Satarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, today is definitely going to be a very ecstatic day. The sun has come out. It's shining, but I think the heat of the sun is not going to be felt so much. But the heat will be on in our enthusiasm to please the Lord and his devotees. Situated in eternal trance, freed from illusion, impelled by the modes of nature. material nature, she forgot her material body, just as one forgets his different bodies in a dream. So, coming toward the end of this chapter, also toward the end of I think the third chapter, the third canto. So I kind of consider this whole episode heroine, Devahuti. She was such a heroine. So anyone who understands the basic principles of the Sankhya philosophy is elevated in devotional service, becomes fully Krishna conscious or liberated, even within this material world. It's Jivan Mukta, liberated even within one's material body. Devahuti made one of the verses, she made such a beautiful comment. But these are the translation or in the purport. But you are the background of material manifestation and all created energy. Speaking to her son, who happened to be none other than the personality of Godhead. Therefore, you're delivering me from the clutches of Maya by explaining the system of Sankhya philosophy is not so astonishing. But your being born from my abdomen is certainly wonderful, because although you are the source of all creation, you have so kindly taken birth as my child. That is most wonderful. Your body is the source of all the universe. And still, you put your body within the abdomen of a common woman like me. To me, that is astonishing. This beautiful realization coming, and she refers to herself, a common woman, as if a common woman could actually give birth to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Sankhya is derived from the meaning, it's a word meaning to count. It's a philosophical system of analyzing matter established by Kapila. And it aims to overcome suffering through cultivating discrimination and by releasing the soul, the Purusha, from its entanglement in matter, in Prakriti. Sometimes it says cultivating discrimination, and sometimes people get really uptight about the word discriminating. Oh, you're discriminating against this, that. Yes, thoughtful discrimination based on spiritual values and principles is wanted and needed. Otherwise, you're just like a little bewildered animal putting your nose everywhere. So we need this discrimination based on spirituality. So it was originally a non-theistic system, and it was delineating 24 material truths or 24 material elements. And then the soul was the 25th. And as the theistic schools began to evolve, they added a 26th element, and that is the Param Purush, God, Param Purush, God. And so you have the Purusha first, based on discrimination by releasing the soul of Purusha. And then you have the Param Purush. So the Purusha and the Param Purush, they're synonymous with the Atma and the Paramatma. So the Vedanta schools, they're accommodated many terms and concepts of Sankhya. And that's also mentioned in the Gita. Then you have this Patanjali yoga, also called Raja or Astanga yoga, closely linked with the Sankhya. And the practice is based on the Patanjali Sutras, which consist of 194 aphorisms, and those are divided into sections. So the sections are the Samadhi, trance, Sadhana, the practice, Vibhuti, mystic powers, and Kaivalya, the ultimate aim. And the process itself is divided into 8 limbs or angas. So Patanjali an ancient exponent of the Raja Yoga, and he was the author of the Yoga Sutras, which are a series of verses about the 8 steps needed to attain self-realization. But in trying to find out something about this personality, what I found out was that actually nobody really knows where he lived. I don't really know so much about his life, although, there's stories. There's always some stories. But his sutras are the general guidelines for spiritual growth through right living. They're not beliefs. It's not a belief system, what he's putting out. So like a belief is something that's accepted or considered to be true. And it can also be a tenet or a body of tenets held by a group. So like as the Hare Krishna members, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we believe Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. That's our belief. It's not something, it's fixed. It's not something that can be discussed in terms of modifying it or eradicating it. Belief firm. And so he had these guidelines, but they weren't beliefs, but they were methods. So the methods are like a procedure, are a process to attain something. So we also have a process, but our process is to attain our belief, the ultimate pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So through the references to yoga within existing scripture, although they have been referenced in existing scriptures since already, you can say, time immemorial, long time in existence. In general, these references to yoga were too diverse, they were too complex for the general public. So then Patanjali, he created the Yoga Sutras as a way of compiling already existing teachings into an easier format to follow and understand for the general mass of people. We have that also, Mahabharata. It was a compilation for persons who were not greatly educated in terms of philosophy. So it's almost in some ways, almost like a series of stories, but they're there to teach, but it's in an easier format. So although the very popular yoga, the most popular in probably the Western atmosphere is the Hatha yoga, it's also related to Ashtanga, particularly in the 3rd stage, but the exercises in Patanjali's system, they're not designed for physical health or, other abstract reasons like we see today, stress relief. Even we'll say that sometimes. You want stress relief? Chant this mantra. But it's a little misleading. It's a good start. It's an icebreaker, but it's not the reality. The stress relief is what you call a byproduct. Good health is a byproduct. So it's there in the Patanjali system, in the Yoga Sutras, but it is there to facilitate meditation and self-realization. So the yogi must be able to sit comfortably, neither straining or falling asleep, in order to have complete control over the breath. So that is the purpose of the exercises, not to stretch the limbs of the body, etc., extend your life. And Patanjali and other great yogis were warned, don't be allured by the mystic cities, the perfections, but to keep in mind the goal of self-realization. And this involves discrimination. We have to be able to discriminate based on Sankhya, freeing oneself of the base qualities, meaning lust, greed, illusion, anger, etc. Have complete control over the mind and the senses. And Patanjali also recommended scriptural study and surrender to the Lord. These bestow peace, illumination, samadhi. If you ask people, what do you want? Quite often, Thoughtful people will say something like they want peace, peace of mind, peace in the world. And there's a way to get that, it's not through legislation, it's not through activism. So then there's Kaivalya, refers to realization that one is not the body, but the soul within. So our introductory, so you're not the body, but that's just an introduction. Next part, you're the soul. What are you? And you're the soul within. And even that is introductory. What about the soul? What is the soul like? What's the purpose of the soul? What are the activities of the soul? So, but when we get at least to the realization one's not the body, but the soul within, then it's explained this is achieved when the yogi is fixed in meditation about the Lord in the heart. Paramatma, and is no longer influenced by the three gunas or the qualities of matter. The Hatha Yoga, and related to the Astanga Yoga, particularly the third stage, it's there, but the reality is it's meant to assist one in the process of self-realization. And then this involves, the discrimination, freeing himself from the modes of material nature. So it's said that it will actually happen that this sage, Patanjali, he attains samadhi through yogic meditation at Brahmapureshwar temple, located at Tirupati in Tamil Nadu. And actually he has this Jiva Samadhi there. It's part of the main complex, but it's enclosed in a meditation hall near Brahma's shrine in the complex. So since all the great sages, the devotees, they apply energy to all activities in the service of the Lord, that's particularly the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. There must be some transcendental pleasure in the toes of the Lord. We talk a lot about the Lord's lotus feet. Or if there's a great soul, his lotus feet, her lotus feet. So it was one of the purports that was reminding how the Lord himself has an interest in his own lotus feet, because he licked his own toes to taste the nectar for which the devotees are always aspiring. So sometimes the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, he wonders how much transcendental pleasure is within himself. And in order to taste his own potency, he'll sometimes take the position of tasting himself. It's a very esoteric meditation. Lord Chaitanya, Krishna himself, but he appears as a devotee to taste the sweetness of the transcendental mellows in himself, which is tasted by Srimati Radharani. Srimati Radharani is the greatest of all devotees. We have the gopis, they're the greatest of devotees, but the greatest of all, Srimati Radharani. So Lord Chaitanya wanted, as Krishna, wanted to know, what is it about me that is attracting her? By his different energy, the Lord bestows different kinds of bodies on the living entities. The living entities are conditioned by their propensity to lord it over material nature. But as a result of that effort, they become so degraded, making that attempt to be the Lord of all I survey, you become degraded. And therefore, there's a very strong need and urgency for enlightenment. It's stated in the Gita that wherever there are discrepancies in the discharge of the real purpose of material existence, the Lord appears as an incarnation. So it was Kapila. Kapila directs fallen souls, he enriches them with knowledge and devotion so we can go back home, back to Godhead. And the spiritual potency of the hearing, the chanting, remembering of the holy name of the Lord is greatly stressed throughout. So Rupa Goswami has discussed the sequence of these sinful activities of the conditioned soul. And he established the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the nectar of devotion, that those engaged in devotional service can become freed from the reactions of all sinful activities. There's no sinful activities in performing devotional service, quite the opposite. Also confirmed in the Gita. So if by chanting the holy names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one becomes so swiftly cleared of all the reactions to sinful activities, what to say of those persons who actually come to see the Lord? They get to the stage where they see the Lord face to face. So that is the possibility that we are being exposed to. We are getting it here. At the same time, there's some imposition of the mind due to the activities of material nature. So we're seeing Krishna. This is Krishna. This is Radha. There's Gornitai. And then we say the deities. They are deities for us. But when this purification through the hearing and the chanting, remembering happens, we'll be seeing Krishna, we'll be seeing Radha, we'll be seeing Gornitai. There will not be an adjustment in our mind. They are there, really there. And it also says, when you get to that stage, you become immediately eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices. So this is, I was thinking, this is over our heads. But it gives us something, we need some goalposts, guideposts as we do our practice. So there is something to go head towards. And we can see ourselves, just like when you're sick, take that temperature, oh, here's my temperature. So we can see, how do we see? Through our attraction or through our distraction. We can see what is our progress. So it's sometimes said that by the chanting, one purifies himself and then can take birth. If you just don't finish the process, then you can take birth in a Brahmana family and then be reformed. But in one of the purports, Prabhupada mentions that at the present moment, and that present moment was even, 40 plus years ago when that commentary might have been written. Even those born in the Brahmana families are not reformed. Nor is there any certainty that they're actually born of Brahmana fathers. It means the father has a thread, but is the father really a Brahmana by activity, by consciousness? So formerly the Garbhadhan Sat reformatory system was prevalent, but at the present, it's not widely practiced, And under those circumstances, no one really knows if a man is factually born of a Brahmin father. It's not guaranteed. So whether one has acquired the qualification of a Brahmana depends on the judgment of a bona fide spiritual master. Sometimes it's remarked that by the chanting process, one begins to purify himself. But next life as a Brahmana, not guaranteed. But by Krishna's mercy, through his pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, we are recipients of a guaranteed process. And our life is assured. Just we have to stick to it, no matter what. Like that poem by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when the mind wanders, keep chanting. When you do this, keep chanting, keep chanting. That's it, Prabhupada commented, one doesn't even have to chant the holy name and understand the whole procedure, namely the offensive stage, like we read the 10 offenses, Hope we can try to remember them through the day, hope we can avoid them, hope we don't forget them. So, But even if we don't come to that offenseless, pure stage of chanting, if the holy name is sounded on the tip of the tongue, That's also sufficient. It's said that Nam, a singular number, one name of Krishna or Rama, is sufficient. No, you shouldn't challenge that. Okay, I've said Rama, Krishna, that's it for the day. No. But the potency is there. And we shouldn't, of course, I mean, is this possible? I can't get it, but I don't believe that. How can that be? Then you're trying to limit Krishna in the form of his name. You know, one devotee was speaking last weekend. I had Cincinnati devotees come to the members of the board of directors and the temple council. So they came to New Vrindavan, and for 2 days we had meetings with different Prabhupada disciples and asking so many questions. Not about their questions were aimed at how can they, as temple leaders, how can we understand things, and how were they enacted by Prabhupada? And how did you, as a devotee, he wanted to know how were the devotees taking this practice and sticking to it? Did you have troubles, and how did you address them? Because troubles come, whether they're personal or, you know, situational, whether they're within the group, they come. And sometimes it's really bewildering. What is going on? I thought if you just said one name, Krishna Rama, it was, you know, Hari Bol, fantastic, no problems whatsoever. So what's going on? So we had these discussions, and it was really very interesting, even for me. I'm sitting there and I'm so-called senior person. I will just say I'm an old lady. I won't say I'm a senior devotee. I'm trying to get to become a devotee. But one devotee was telling how when he first saw the deities, you know, because mostly those of you from a background from India, you have some familiarity with deities. But that doesn't mean you know what a deity is. It doesn't mean you know Radha and Krishna, but you've seen deities. Maybe your grandmother, your great-grandmother, even my parents might have had some little icon or statue in the house. And if you were really fortunate, they might have actually worshipped them consistently. So you got that exposure. But for us, this was something like really dramatically out of the world. And for members of early day ISKCON, the first deity was Jagannath Swami, Jagannath Subhadra Baladev. Fortunately, we were very open. It was fantastic. This is God. But this one devotee saw the deities. I'll take a pause. I remember another devotee in Amsterdam. They had Jagannath Subhadra Baladev. And this devotee comes first time with his wife. What is this? Maybe they're balloons. They couldn't, it was actually their installation, couldn't figure it out at all. And then they're bathing them and putting flowers on, so they're just thinking, these people, they must be stoned. Means they must have taken some intoxication. So this devotee sees, it was in New Vrindavan, he sees Radha Vrindavan Chandra for the first time ever seeing any deities. And then he's told, this is Krishna, this is God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the eternal consort Radharani, and trying to get around. So every time you would see the deities, it's going to yours, you tell yourself, this is Krishna, this is God. They're not a stone, they're not a statue. You kind of remind yourself. And one day he just said, Krishna, if this is really you, can you just give me a sign? I just need a sign. Something that assures me this is really you. And he was praying like this for some time. And one day in that mood, he was looking at the deities, and all of a sudden there was a whole dimension that he'd never experienced before. They weren't statues, they weren't stones. Krishna was there with Radharani. And he was at them with such amazement, and he understood Krishna had answered his prayer. And then he thought, no, this can't be. The minute that happened, these layers by layers of coverings, like cataracts of the eye, started falling down, and suddenly there he was looking at the deities or deities again, because Krishna answered his prayer. He was, no, this can't be. Okay, back to ignorance. But the deities are powerful. They are powerful. Krishna is the most powerful. So specifically, this chanting to Vyamam to you only means only chant God's names, not like the Mayavadi philosophers say, any name, even demigod's name, names of the energies of the Lord. It's all right, doesn't matter, you can chant. No, only the holy name of the Supreme Lord will be effective. And anyone who compares the holy name of the Supreme Lord to the names of demigods, that's one of our little offenses that we recite. What is that? Pasandi, an offender. So the holy name has to be chanted to please the Supreme Lord, not for any sense gratification or for some professional purpose, not even for peace, not even for change. So many things we say chant for this or that. Nowadays, I'm talking about devotees, get bewildered. Only chanted for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. And if this pure mentality is there, then even a person is in a low family, like a dog eater, that's the famous example, always a dog eater. Like, how many people can relate to a dog eater? I mean, many of us have done some pretty gross things in our life, but I'm pretty sure none of us have ever done that. Now, there are countries in the world that they do that. But one of those countries recently, due to the upcry of the moralistic people, not for any pure spiritual reason, moralistic, they're banning dog eating. You can't. You could go. I was in Taiwan once, and I was I had a couple of hours. I said, let me just look around the city. And I went, and it was a market, it was just all these beautiful flowers and vegetables and wonderful things. And all of a sudden I see all these animals. And I'm thinking it's like a pet store. And then I suddenly saw that, oh my God, they were getting slaughtered on the spot, and people were buying these animals to eat them. We see that sometimes in our stupid supermarkets, they have a tank full of lobsters or some, and then they pull them out and sell them, and people take them home and put them in hot water and kill them on the spot in their own home. Don't even think what they're doing, just for the tongue. Thank you, Prabhupada, for saving us from such a distorted existence. So, if the mentality is there and the proper pure mentality, even in a so-called low-born, in the example of low-born dog eaters, but obvious that there's other stages of, so the dog eaters are kind of like, you can't get much lower than that. When I lived in Europe, I was doing Sankirtan book distribution in several countries, but particularly in Holland and in Belgium. And each one of us in my party, we had our specialties, and I was going to factories. I would go into factory areas. You'd have big areas, and we have it here too, where factories are. And they would have these slaughterhouses also. And out in front of the slaughterhouse, they'd hang a form of a horse or a pig or a cow or a goat, a sheep. So then you knew what was going on in that building. And I realized, wow, these people are suffering and they're causing suffering. So I decided I was going to go to all the slaughterhouses. And the only book I had at that point in their language was the first edition of the Hare Krishna cookbook. I had books in English, but I was pretty sure they wouldn't be able to follow them. So I was going to the slaughterhouses with the Hare Krishna cookbook, which obviously vegetarian. And just to avoid any confusion, here, take it for your wife. Tak for the Frau. I was saying it in their language. Tak for the Frau, okay. Such a ghastly situation. I'd see people, it was not unusual to see missing fingers, you know. So definitely a low-born life. But even in a low-born life, one has the opportunity to the mercy of the Maha Mantra, if chanted with a pure intention to please Krishna. And even such a person can become eligible to become a spiritual master, you know, to bring others to the stage, because they to deliver them to the stage of devotional service of bhakti. Word Gunanti means already established in the perfectional stage of ritualistic performances. Doesn't matter what you were, once you enter into this stage of perfection, you know, it's all gone. So if one is seated on the bench of a high court judge, it's giving judgments on a case, it means he's already passed all the legal exams. And he's better than those who are engaged in the study in the law, or those expecting to study in the future. So Prabhupada uses that as an example. In a similar way, persons who are chanting the holy name are transcendental to those who are actually performing Vedic rituals, and those who expect to be qualified. And about all the chanters, the one who is fully purified is the best. But even if you're not even fully purified, as long as one is chanting and attempting to chant without offense, one is gaining a promotion, advancing, in other words, in spiritual life. This is pratyahara, you know, wind up the activities of the senses. You know, we're meant to be doing this. The level of realization of the Supreme Lord was evidenced by Devahuti. And it's possible when one is able to withdraw the senses from material activities. And then one, at that level, when one is engaged in devotional service, there's no scope for the senses to be engaged otherwise. And the result is that in full Krishna consciousness, one can understand the Supreme Lord as he is. This was the wonderful outcome of Devahuti's becoming the mother of Kapila and receiving the teachings directly from her son. You know, and devotional service is so perfect simply by following the rules and regulations and executing them under the direction of a spiritual master. One is liberated even in this body. You know. Sometimes doubts will arise in the minds of neophytes, newer devotees. Even persons who've been practicing can be hit with a doubt about whether or not the spiritual master is liberated. And sometimes devotees are doubtful about the bodily affairs of the spiritual master. But it's pointed out that the point of liberation is not to see the bodily symptom of the spiritual master. One has to see the spiritual symptoms of the spiritual master, the spiritual symptoms. And Jivan Mukta means that even though one is in a material body, if you have a material body, there's going to be material necessities, because the body is made of matter. But because one is fully situated in the service of the Lord, then one should be understood as liberated. We saw with Srila Prabhupada that he had some issue with his body, and they wanted to do this minor procedure, but it would involve, it was minor but slightly invasive. So it means they wanted to use some anesthesia. And he refused, and then they said, well, some kind of, pain relieving medication. He refused. And the doctors are thinking, well, then how can we do this if he's just sitting there fully conscious? Which was the whole point, that he was fully conscious. Therefore, he could, fully conscious on the level of not being the body, being eternal, liberated soul in the service of the Lord. That he was able to sit there and have this procedure done without flinching. Not too many people can understand that type of liberation. It entails being situated in one's own position. And that's the definition in the Bhagavatam, is muktir sarupena vivastiti. So the actual identity, the sarup, the actual identity of the living entity, described by Lord Chaitanya, is Jivara Swarupoi Krishnara Nityadas from the Madhya Lila. The real identity of the living entity is that he's eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. So when somebody is 100% engaged in the Lord, then it's understood they're liberated. So one must understand whether or not one is liberated by one's activities in devotional service, not by other symptoms. So those who are unable to remain alone are given license to live within the household life, wife, children, not for sense gratification, but for the cultivation of Krishna consciousness. One of the other wonderful things in this particular canto and in this chapter, they were talking about airships, others, spaceships, planes. And it was explained how those airships are not like what we've invented in this modern age that fly only from one country to another. That they're airplanes that could go from one planet to another. Not only that, they weren't made of all kinds of metals and plastics and, they were made of flowers. And you're thinking, wait a minute, there must be some kind of swapna. That's a dream, something. But there was, this beautiful airship that was like a city, floating within the atmosphere, fully equipped. But there's many statements like this in the Bhagavatam from which we can understand there were facilities to travel from planet to planet, especially in the higher planetary system. So who can say that they're not still traveling? Now we're struggling to do that, make these incredible suits that will allow you to breathe outside the atmosphere. That we're only able to breathe in a certain atmosphere. Certain ratio of oxygen must be there. So if you're going to go outside the atmosphere to another planet or moon or wherever you think you're going, you need some special additional help to do that. No, they're just on their flower airplane enjoying, going here and there. No air pollution, no sound pollution, no water or earth pollution, no leftover pieces of metal and electronic components to dispose of. Like, I don't know, was it last week or something, down in Florida, some man's in his house, his little son is in the next room, and a piece of debris they have this international space system, it's just, station sits out there, and from time to time it gets cluttered. So they take the clutter with their little waves and put them on a space pallet and jettison it out further into space. And then it's supposed to disintegrate after some time. It gets into the atmosphere, and some kind of it burns up and disintegrates. Further pollution. But in this case, occasionally it happens, a piece of it somehow made it through, came all the way through down and landed in this man's house. He was on one side, the kid was on the other in another room, and the thing went right in. It wasn't huge. I think it was like 1.5 pounds, a little more, but still, coming at the speed it was coming. If you got hit by it, it could be pretty bad. So the type of airplanes and space travel in the spiritual world, we don't have those incidents, you know. And the flowers they had, they didn't rot or decay. The leaves didn't fall off, the petals didn't fall off unless you wanted them to. So the speed of our airplanes and space vehicles are limited, but Kardama Muni he was traveling in outer space in that airplane, which was like the city, you know, beyond, you know, you couldn't put a speed limit. There's no speed limits in space, by the way. So attachment, we saw that, you know, Devahuti had this attachment for his son. All her other attachments were easily given up by her. One attachment was remaining, that was for her son, and it was described, she was just crying for that son. Asking people to bring the son, find and bring the son. So if the Supreme Personality of Godhead can appear as the son of Devahuti, he can also appear, it says, as the son of any other woman, provided that woman is qualified. Think about that for a while. You know? And then here's somebody that's elevated as Devahuti. She gets, you know, this amazing person for a husband. Then she gets this amazing son. And the father, the husband had left, the son had left, and she's lamenting. But not an ordinary lamentation, because her love was for the personality of Godhead. And unless we're able to transfer our attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there's no possibility of becoming freed from a material attachment. But her son was not a material person. And eventually that clarity came, you know, that clarity came. And then she was well situated, says eternally. So simply knowing that one is not matter but spirit, it doesn't purify the intelligence. You know. So even the impersonalists, they get to that highest platform. For them, that's the highest platform. Then we hear how they will fall again. Why? Because they're not situated in the transcendental loving service. They're not in a permanent relationship with the Supreme Lord. So we can only give up material attachment when we start to get some attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like the Bhagavad Gita says, this param drishta nivartate, higher taste. You know. Kapila was describing one who's full of Mad Gunashruti Matrena, one who is fully Krishna conscious, situated in the personality of Godhead, is immediately saturated with love of God. Another thermometer for us, spiritual thermometer. Are we being immediately situated in this pure transcendental love of God? Probably not to the full extent, but we're making progress, and we shouldn't doubt that. You know, just look back at where you came from, where you started. Think about the first day you walked into a Hare Krishna temple and where you are now. The progress is there. You know. So Gadari was expert in accepting the real substance. He was contemplating the form of Vishnu as advised by her son, Kapila Dev. And at the same time, she's thinking of Kapila Dev, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in that way, she completely perfected her austerities, her penances, and she had transcendental realization. You know, that is ultimately where we're heading. And this narration of Kapila and his mother is so perfect and transcendental that even if one only hears or reads this description, there is opportunity for the highest perfectional goal in life just by engaging in loving service to those lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. And there's no doubt that Devahuti, who had the Supreme Lord as her son and who followed the instructions of Kapila Dev so nicely, She attained the highest perfection of human life. So even though she was lamenting for her son, otherwise she was detached. But she was begging the Lord she may remain undistracted. This, she didn't want to be distracted by material distractions. And yet she had this attraction, this attachment for her son. What a conundrum. The Supreme Personality of God as your son. You hope to be so attracted and so attached. The famous prayer by Kunti Devi, where she was requesting the personality of Godhead to cut her attachment, her material attachment to her family. Why? So she can fully absorb on the Lord's lotus feet. So these are, high level states. We're not at that point yet, but heading in that direction, So we should help each other. We should help ourselves, help each other. And in one way, we're sitting here in the flower temple, the flower airplane temple. Remember, how many of you saw this place before it was transformed? So you remember where you're sitting right here, there was a 30-foot solid oak bar with all the liquors behind on the shelf. What happens when Krishna is interjected into the picture? So we have these, sometimes our hearts are like solid wood. We have to polish them a bit. Do the chanting, careful hearing, and the careful sharing. As I mentioned yesterday, Prabhupada instructed Jamuna, if you don't share what I have taught you, you'll become envious. Envy is such a poison. So I'm sure that this afternoon, so many people will come who might not have ever been here before. So take care of them so they also become infected by the holy name, infected by the kindness of the devotees, and become interested in coming back again. Oh, Hare Krishna. Any points, any comments? Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
So wonderful to hear you all the time. It's one thing to hear book Bhagavad and another thing is to hear book Bhagavad from Master Bhagavad. And I was just thinking about the discussions which we had yesterday from the streets. Ram Prabhu, this is so wonderful. I had one clarity which I was thinking about. When we follow the process, and I'm particularly talking about myself, reach to a certain extent, there is a growth, definitely there is a growth, and I see in the past. But it apparently looks like after a certain period of time, there is no doubt about the process work because there are so many examples. But there is a thought which comes in, maybe I am incompatible to the process. I'm not fit for this process because I'm not doing it properly, and the progress is so limited. But at the same time, after understanding this philosophy, it's crystal clear that that's the goal. And now you don't belong here, you don't belong there, but you want to lead towards that. What do we do there?
It's like we're in suspended animation. I can't go out there anymore. And I haven't quite got that far. Keep going. Even if we just remain there, we know we're clear. I can't go back there. And we're all receivers of causeless mercy. Okay, maybe some past life we're here, but what's keeping us here? Causeless mercy. So the causeless mercy can come at any time to anyone. And it's not just a one-time addition, it can be, but for those who are making the endeavor, it can come again and again. Like Prophet said, I've only brought one medicine, please take it. So just keep taking that medicine. It's our eternal salvation. This chanting of the holy name. And if we feel that we're not progressing at a kind of, that we may be a little stagnated or suspended, it may be, but that's not an eternal place. And if somebody actually, you may slow down and even put a full stop. Sometimes that happens. But Krishna doesn't let it happen for long. But remember, Krishna's dealing with eternal time. So the time of Krishna, we're thinking long in terms of what do you mean tomorrow or in an hour? I don't know. But we'll move along just by the fact that you're thinking about it and making that attempt. And Krishna has given you in this lifetime such an incredible situation in which to actually practice this philosophy in reality, in real time. Here's the book and here's the reality. So we actually, any one of us at any time, we have that opportunity to jump out of the book and here's reality, experience the reality of devotional service. Frankly, if it wasn't for this, I don't see anybody could live when you see what's going on out there, the insanity of it. How could you not want to embrace something that will permanently remove you from that existence? So it takes a little effort. Why not? Nothing comes easily, nothing comes cheaply, but even the effort is blissful. The same thing we're doing now we'll be doing, but in heightened level of consciousness, just like you'll be seeing Krishna. Prabhupada would go and speak to Krishna. Some devotees say, he's speaking to the deities. No, he's speaking to Krishna. We were hearing yesterday how he was asking Krishna, Krishna was telling him to come, and he said, oh, wait a minute. I don't want to do that, There he was, happily situated. But when someone is surrendered to Krishna, that means, and he acts upon that surrender, then it means that they're fully protected and guided by Krishna. It's not an ordinary life, it's just an extraordinary life. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. So, do you have any further announcements? Okay, well, in 27 minutes, there's kirtan. I tend to get fixated on time things. Somebody will be leading the kirtan. Yeah. Chandra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Radha Gopi Jana Vallabha ki jai.